This morning's sermon, Come Yet Again Come, is provided by several members of the UUCJ congregation, and as I said, is part of our summer series, Living Our UU Values. Between the months of December and March, 3 board members and Reverend Paul attended the UU Southern Region's Extended Leadership Experience. These board members studied UU leadership development and became more grounded in congregational foundations, systems theory, and faith development. Today, they will share what they learned about congregational foundations. I would also mention that today's meditation is embedded in the sermon. So we welcome Teri Mitchell this morning and Nancy Murrey-Settle and Munsell McPhillips to our virtual pulpit this morning.
Good morning. The message that Nancy, Munsell, and I are sharing with you today is reflected in the words of the 13th century poet Rumi when he wrote, "Even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times over, come yet again, come." That message can certainly apply in many situations, but how it applies to us, to UUs, as members of UUCJ, is what we'll be addressing today. We could replace the word vow with covenant in Rumi's poem. Even if you have broken your covenant 1,000 times, come yet again, come. Because that's really what a covenant is. It's a vow, a sacred vow, a deep, abiding promise that we first make to ourselves. If we don't start with ourselves, then it's not real. Our covenant is what we call ourselves back to when we stray from our intentions. It's how we as a church bring our core values into the world. In my first days at UUCJ, which is my first UU church, by the way, I learned very quickly that a covenantal religion is what we are, not a creedal one. And that resonated deeply with me. I came from a Methodist background where every single Sunday, the congregation recites the Apostles' Creed together. It starts with the words, "I believe." Each member affirms that they believe the exact same version of truth. That belief is static. There's no room for interpretation. No other sources are considered. There is one and only one set of core beliefs in a creedal religion, and everyone is expected to hold them. But when we allow ourselves to explore, to question, to reach out to other sources, to grow, to change our minds, we can't be joined by any form of rigid dogma, but we can be, and we are bound together by our values. What are our values? What's at our core? The famous UU theologian James Luther Adams laid out what he called the 5 smooth stones, and they represent the 5 core values of liberal religion. The first smooth stone is representative of the understanding that revelation is open and continuous. Religious liberalism depends on this principle, that there are many sources of wisdom. The truth is not frozen in one ancient book. We're constantly learning new truths, and this gives us hope for the future. Next, the understanding that relationships are consensual. We freely choose to enter into our relationships. We're not threatened with unspeakable punishments if we don't follow one exact path. And where there's no threat of retribution, we have love. Third, we have a responsibility, a moral obligation to build a just and loving community. And not just for ourselves, but justice for everyone. The quest for justice is not limited to stopping injustice. We also have the obligation to strive for reconciliation, to make things whole again. I'm sure that I am not alone in saying that I learned a lot from the UUCJ history wall. What a deep and rich record this church has had in our pursuit of justice. And we, this current congregation, are challenged to carry on that tradition. By living out this responsibility, we have justice. The next of Adam's smooth stones is, and I will quote, to deny the immaculate conception of virtue. That is a mouthful. But a loose translation of that would be that we are not born virtuous. We have to work at it. It takes human hands and will to do that work. And in willingness to do these things, we show courage. And last, our fifth smooth stone represents that we already have the resources, both human and spiritual, that we need to bring about these changes. This is a cause for what Adams terms ultimate optimism, and it brings us joy. The returns of living the values represented by the five smooth stones: hope, love, justice, courage, joy. Our covenant, our promise to ourselves, to each other, and the realm beyond. Our covenant is our vow for how we will live these core values together and bring them to the broader world. Please join with me now to reflect upon this beautiful meditation on the five smooth stones written by Connie Goodbread from the UUA. With hope for a bright future, I come in trust. With love in my heart for all creation, I come in humility. Seeking justice for all, marginalizing none, I come in open-mindedness. With courage, I come willing to be transformed. With great joy, I come to bind myself to you, so that together we can do what I cannot do alone. Contemplating these words, let us be together in a period of silent meditation.
Thank you, Teri. Our next speaker is Nancy Murrey-Settle.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Teri. Martin Buber, a Jewish theologian, wrote that we humans are a promise-making, promise-breaking people. Despite all of our good intentions and high ideals, we often fall short. We make promises and we break promises. It doesn't mean that we are doomed to failure, just that we are human. Fortunately, over and over, we are called to come back and recommit ourselves. Fortunately, we are given the opportunity to deepen our faith through these setbacks. Everyone is familiar with the promise making and promise breaking of New Year's resolutions. I can't tell you how many times I quit smoking before I was finally able to let it go. The secret to my success? I promised myself that I would never quit quitting. I wouldn't give up on myself. When the promise making moves from me to we, a community is built. When we are working to build a beloved community, a community which is radically inclusive, we're called to stretch. The act of inviting, welcoming, and giving voice to all people is not easy work. It requires reconciliation, forgiveness, commitment, and unconditional love. It is a lot to ask. As we work to build beloved community, we will encounter obstacles, we'll argue, and we'll falter along the way. There may even be times when we just throw up our hands in despair and walk away. The real question is, are we able to see the value of our commitment and keep coming back to it? Through the promise-making and promise-breaking path of a covenantal faith, we have the opportunity to deepen our faith and our spiritual development. We're given the opportunity to grow in understanding of what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist. As a member of this UUCJ community, I understand that my faith is grounded in the mission to make the world a better place. Our mission statement, the one we wrote just before the COVID pandemic hit, reads, by serving compassionately and communicating authentically, we change the world. I realize that I can't do that work alone, that my actions to make the world a better place are stronger when I work with others. So we covenant to come together to bring this mission statement to life as members and friends of UUCJ. But wow, that is some deep work right there. Serving and communicating together with others to work on a big common goal is tough. There's conflict, there can be disagreement. Yes, there are successes along the way, but there's also many failures. By serving and communicating, we create the opportunities for promise making and promise breaking, for living out and demonstrating our commitments to our values, and thereby growing in our faith and spiritual development. Our covenants can move from a promise we make to ourselves to a promise we make, like we do in a community with others, and to a promise we make with a higher self, perhaps, a creative source, a God, a divinity. Now, each week we declare that love is the doctrine of this church, the quest of truth, its sacrament, service, its prayer. We say to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with one another. We most certainly are a covenantal faith. We have promised to build a community of love and serve in the work of social justice, to make the world better for all people with that covenant. How do we stay loyal to that big commitment? What do we do when we're asked to dismantle institutional structures that have reinforced white supremacy and find that even the words white supremacy may make us uncomfortable? How do we stick with that work? How do we return again and again to the work we have covenanted to do together when we fall short and get frustrated, disagree, or sometimes just get distracted with more profane tasks? I would like to propose that the work that we do as a community to build beloved community is sacred work. You may not feel moved to sit on the membership committee with me or to help Teri build back the social justice committee, because that just seems like very profane day-to-day busyness. But I'll argue that it's sacred work, this building back the structure of our community, which allows us to work together on those covenantal goals and the 7 principles, which are also covenants. Serving on the mission funding campaign, or volunteering to be an RE teacher, working the Sunday coffee hour, or taking a leadership role. Those are much more than the details of the task at hand. It's giving action to the words of our various covenants. It's providing each of us with the opportunity to develop and deepen in our faith and our spiritual understanding. Now, if you're with us today listening to these words, you have committed to staying and continue recommitting to these promises that we have freely, voluntarily, mutually, and non-coercively made to build community at UUCJ and to go out and change the world. I thank you, and I look forward to journeying together with you in this work.
Thank you, Nancy. And our next speaker is Munsell McPhillips.
Thank you both. Nancy and Martin Buber's beautiful words that we are a promise-making, promise-breaking, promise-keeping, promise-renewing people. Those words are both humbling and hopeful. I begin by honoring promise-keeping. When the pandemic hit hard a year ago March, our worship and music committees and our magnificent tech team had to figure out meaningful worship services, virtual worship services, almost from scratch and in very short order. For going on 16 months now, they show up again and again, innovating a bit as they go, and they hold this congregation together. They embody what living in covenant looks like, and I am very grateful. We're also a people of broken covenants, some of them big. For those of you who are new, this concerns the sudden departure of our last full-time minister and our religious exploration director in 2018. The entire congregation was damaged. The pain extended in every direction from the ensuing rancor and confusion. And some carry the sorrow and anger to this day. Words cannot be unsaid or deeds undone. We can't pretend it didn't happen, but we can heal. Recall the last phrase of Martin Buber's beautiful saying, "We are a promise renewing people too." So how do we do that? To that point, when the Ministerial Search Committee interviewed candidates, they sought one with specific skills and experience in working with fractured congregations. They found that candidate in Reverend Leanne Washington. When she joins us in September, she brings that wisdom and experience with her. But we need to be very clear that no matter how skillful Reverend Leanne is, the work of renewal is ours. While we will benefit from her insight and her guidance, the task of restoring our beloved community lies with each of us. We understand that our past informs us, but it does not own us. We can choose to move forward with hope and purpose. I was thinking of this when I heard Teri explain the 5 smooth stones. My very favorite of those is that we deny the Immaculate Conception of virtue. If you just want to sit with that a second. Yes, we do have to learn virtue. We're not born with it. But it also means that when facing trouble, we don't wait for shining knights or shining angels for that matter. We accept that the work of this world is ours to do. Ordinary mortals, one step at a time. And the world certainly needs us now. We who seek justice and love mercy. It is daunting to behold the vast injustices in our world or watch the awful speed with which climate change descends on us all. Alone, we can do so little, but together we're powerful. And it seems to me that we are called to transform our concern to tend to the needs of so many others. As it happens, we're entering a season of new beginnings, so it's fitting that we prepare the renewal of our covenant too. On September 12th, we will reopen our sanctuary for hybrid services, virtual for those who prefer and in person for those who are ready. Once again, our mighty tech team has been working relentlessly for months to make new technology to make the virtual service more inclusive. And by happy coincidence, Reverend Leanne will lead her first service from our sanctuary that very day. And for more renewal-related news shortly thereafter, we anticipate beginning work on a major renovation of our social hall. The new space won't just be beautiful and more practical, it will be fully accessible and flood resilient. The collaboration between our capital campaign, campus operations, keepers of the church, our design professionals, our vulnerability task force, and many others has been a joy to witness. I think that the renewal of our campus is a harbinger for the renewal of our community. One of the many, many things I love about being a UU is that at our best, we don't call people out, not even in fierce disagreement. We call each other back into covenant, back into beloved community. And we do this knowing full well that we are fallible humans living in perilous times and that we will fall down again. We will mess up. None of us is immune to emotions running away from us, or our wisdom failing us, or our hubris overriding reason. Nevertheless, as a people of covenant, we can always pick each other up, renew our promises, and carry on the work of healing a wounded world again and yet again. May it be so.